Hi, and welcome back to the Pathway to Profit podcast with the two Gregs. Thank you for joining me today.
No problem at all. How are you today, Greg?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm really excited about talking about this. It seems like a good follow-up to our last one where we were talking about kind of the cloud and the way that it was progressing from software as a service to infrastructure as a service. And that led to a conversation about apps and app integration. So excited to kind of see where it goes. What do you think we should start? And what's your ideas?
So, yeah, like you said, last time we were talking about the different apps and the cloud apps, and so this time we thought we'd dig a bit deeper into some of the we did say we would, and we have into the app integrations that some of the softwares offer. I thought we'd kind of primarily focus on Zoho and Zero. A lot of the apps do have integration to an extent, but these two very much A, market themselves, and B, are a lot more open than most other apps in the integration that they have. And so I thought they would be kind of good case studies, especially because they go about it slightly different ways than each other. So they're not doing the same strategy in this. They're taking slightly different strategies, which I think is quite interesting.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I think, we said before that you can get a long way with some of the apps that integrate with Microsoft and,
Yeah.
SharePoint and using that infrastructure. But I think this is a good place to start. So I think three would get confusing. Was there any other kind of logic behind kind of why those two?
Yeah, so with Zoho, that's very much a customer focused, and in my experience, they've they start kind of with the CRM in mind and work out into lots of different things from Zoho Sign to the accounting system and a lot in between that. Whereas with Zero, they kind of go for more of they're more likely to have third party integrations. Obviously, both do have third party, but the way it kind of when you look at Zoho, they a lot more push their own products, whereas with Zero, they are a lot more open to third parties. Again, in my experience of using both apps.
And of course, with Zero, they start with the accounting software, and so that's at the center of their universe as opposed to the CRM. So yeah, I
Exactly.
think they're two. Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, that probably for me is maybe a first focal point, right? If your belief is that your CRM is the the crown of your business, then maybe for the relevant pieces, Zoho or something like that is the right environment to kind of look at how you integrate the apps. Whereas with Zero, like you said, they integrate different things. So like for CRM, I think Spot is one of the ones that integrates with them. Obviously others, but and so on. There's lots of different apps out there that kind of integrate along that path. So yeah, I think they're good ones. I know you've helped a number of clients with their integration, and
Yeah.
I don't think that obviously we can't cover everything to do with integration, but I thought that it would be worth just kind of asking you in your experience where it went well or it goes well, kind of what what's been a factor and what have you either done or seen that helps with that, and then the conversely where it's maybe been a little bit more challenging or inappropriate timing to look at it. What have you seen? And maybe pick on a couple of different apps that you integrate. It could be time management. I know you've done that. It could be stock systems. It could be project profitability. It could be a number of things that you've done CRM. So pick a couple and let's kind of, what will be your kind of starter for 10? What if I was somebody who's coming to you and saying, hey, I want to integrate across my business. I want to kind of lead with an infrastructure that's all cloud based. Where do I start? What do I do? Where do I go? What would you suggest?
So if at first you haven't stuck to Zoho or Zero, a bit like we kind of talked about earlier, my first thought would be where's your priorities in the systems. Zoho takes a lot more of a customer focus, as we said, whereas Zero is a lot more of a financial look at things. So that would kind of be my first thought process when I came to this. It would be, where's my priorities? If you kind of looked at it and you've decided that one is better than the other, then if you're looking at Zoho, like I said, Zoho very much likes to use their own apps if possible. And so when you kind of integrating Zoho apps, it becomes they try and make it as easy as possible in their process for their own apps. And so I would always kind of take a preference to their own ones, apart from a third party one. In my experience, it tends to work a lot better. With Zero, you have a complication of there's a lot to choose from, and quite often you'll have like 5 or 6 apps that all do very similar things that integrate to Zero, and then it very much becomes where the key thing comes is not rushing through the process and making sure that we're looking at it and getting the right one for those particular needs, because they all have different focuses. And so it's very tough to not get all those focus to make the decision in a quick scenario. And so it's kind of accepting that your time frame is maybe going to be a little bit pushed. And then the second thing that you kind of come up against is trying to get people to use this new system. It takes time to get employees to get used to it, to get the owners used to it, to get customers used to maybe new ways of working and stuff. And so it's just, the thing I find is a lot of people when they first do it want to just rush through and like, next week I want to be having this project management system up. And I obviously you can't do that. I mean, pick a software, we can integrate it, and in a week it could, I mean, maybe a week's harsh, but we could try and do that time frame. But you're not necessarily getting the best product out of it. So I think the people who try and take their time to make sure it's the right product for them, that's really what you should be looking for. Because the worst thing would be to spend all the money and then come up a year later and be like, you know what, I got to change to this other one because I've read now and they're actually doing exactly what I need, and this one that we picked isn't doing what I need. I mean, you don't want to be doing that. That's criminal in business because you wasted a year.
So if I kind of reiterate back what you said, so there's kind of a step where you got to evaluate what the real need is. I know that one of the things that you do is you map out the processes where they are. You look for weaknesses in that process and ways to kind of improve that process. Then there's a period of time when you transition from maybe an old system to a new one. Maybe they run side by side. And then there's a process of training, and I guess you'd call it change management, where you got to get people to do things in a new way. And
Absolutely.
you made a point that getting the team on board, is an important part of this. So sounds to me
And it's as much as sales as anything else. A lot of people are notoriously not good at change, and is that, so in a way you got to think of it as you're selling it to them of how it's going to help them, help the business, and help the future of the company. That because one thing you can guarantee is people like their comfort zones, and if they've been doing it, especially if they've been doing it for a lot of years, they're very used to that way of doing things. and it's going to be tough to get them to kind of accept new processes or change in processes unless they can see the benefits and they know why they're doing it. So it is very much so you do kind of have to think of it as partially. I mean, in a way, you're the boss. You've got to tell them, but if for the best way of people picking it up, you really want people, as many people as you can, to be on board with that change, so that people aren't. Because as soon as you hit snags, and you will hit snags, it's not going to be perfect out the gate. Then at least they're going to be willing to work with you in those scenarios.
That's interesting. So, I mean, one of the other things that I know that you did, and you mentioned it earlier, is you talked about kind of thinking lead to cash and taking each one of those chunks, whether it was generating a lead, converting the sale, generating the invoice, paying your suppliers, getting paid yourself, all the way through to producing management accounts, producing accounts. Within that, you almost want to think about what are your tools and your systems along that progression, so that you understand, do I need to integrate now, or should I integrate in the future? I know before you mentioned that one of the key elements is that these things can add up and they can get expensive, right? And so I
Yeah.
guess that's part of the evaluation. So it's not necessarily that it's not on the plan or that it's not something that you want to do, but it's figuring out when's the right time for me to spend that money on infrastructure, as opposed to something else, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, an important point that you raised earlier. And I guess in figuring out what environment is right for you is good. What's your thoughts on kind of having different things for different parts, right? So you mentioned that, Zoho, picking on that one, might be good for the customer relationship management side. And I know that they have things that look at what communication, what's going on social media and things like that. So let's just pick on that one. And then you have other elements, which is around, Xero. I mean, do you have a view as to should people kind of lock and load on one and just kind of stick with it no matter what, or have kind of a bit of a mixed infrastructure, or do you have an opinion on that?
Sometimes a mixed structure can work. The issue I tend to find with mixed structures is the more you mix in, the more places you have to update. For example, you don't want it that when you onboard, you're having to update your accounting system, your CRM system, your telephone system, your email system. If they're not all integrated, you could have 4 or 5 places you need to update, and that's going to lead to confusion, potentially, and B, every time something changes, you've got to remember to change it in every single place, which relies on communication and remembering where all this information is. And so while mixed things can work, I would make sure you're being selective about where you're mixing, and that there's not too much overlap, because if you're getting a lot of overlap and you're having to update pretty much the same information in 2 places or 3 or 4, then that's going to kind of get a bit confusing and just add unnecessary processes to your day. And I often find when you have mixed things, you'll remember that you'll have this one place where you go for specific things and that's all updated, but then if you look at anywhere else, it's old information. And then, but if someone else uses that more than the one that you use, and you haven't updated the one that they use, they then get confused because they're still using the old stuff and they're not. So I would always, if you can integrate, I would always try to encourage integration, because it does make life a lot easier than not integrating.
So I guess the key is to kind of have this plan as to here's where I am, here's what I want to get to, and make sure that you're executing down a road that kind of works for you.
Because as
Uh,
you alluded to, I mean, you don't need to do it all in one go. You can have a step plan to get to where you need to. And maybe you know where you are now, and you know that when you reach certain goals, you'll have different needs that need to be met. And so different apps will then be better for you.
that's good. Anything else that you'd like to call out in this in
Um,
this section?
just one kind of anecdotal thing from something I experienced with a client, and it's kind of an interesting story, and it's just one just to get people to think about, especially for Zero with their third party apps. This is a potential risk that you don't kind of think about, and then it happens, and you're like, "Oh God, what do I do now?" But basically, this client they have a lot of stock, and they needed a stock management system. So they did a lot of work in order to find the right stock system that integrated. They used Zero at the time, and they did all this work. And I think it took months to get it up to date and all in process, and all ready. And then they had the initial put it in. They used it for about 3 or 4 years, I think, and then all of a sudden it got bought by QuickBooks. And for a while, QuickBooks kept it with Zero and kept it integrated. But then all of a sudden, QuickBooks unintegrated it. They actually decommissioned the thing, and they basically had bought it because they had certain features that they wanted to include in their own stock, uh, in their own stock, in their own offering. So then they had to find a whole new stock management, and the work had to be done. Now, to be honest, at the time, there was no way of knowing that QuickBooks were going to come in and buy it. There wasn't any news about it. There wasn't being talked about. So that's just one other thing to kind of, it's kind of like an anecdotal thing of something I have experienced. I wouldn't be too worried about it, but just to kind of note that it can happen to people, and just to be cautious, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, in the last one though, we did talk a little bit about criteria of when you're going to work with someone, and we did talk about the financial stability of the company and access to funds, and
Yeah,
whether they were part of a large company already or they were more of a kind of startup. And I guess, if it's a startup funded by venture capital or something like that, then there's going to be an exit strategy somewhere, and that
yeah,
exit strategy is going to be sell to someone, right? I would think. And so, yeah, again, it's probably not predictable, but to be honest, if you overlaid that criteria, it would have been something that maybe you'd have flagged, right?
I'm. I mean,
You know,
in certain circumstances, the problem is you can't
no, no, yeah,
account
I'm
for
not.
every
I'm saying obviously
situation, and
hindsight's 20/20, right?
yeah,
Hindsight's
in
20/20,
hindsight, and
but I do think it's a good anecdote, and I
mm,
guess it's a dynamic market with a lot of things changing, and so having that upfront criteria, which obviously is how relevant is it, how well does it do the job, is a good one, and it's important. And like you say, there's so many apps out there that finding that right app is really important, but recognizing that probably this isn't a forever thing, right? You've got to continuously change. So I guess, if you are in a business where your infrastructure is a key element to your success, and that's what you see as being, so important. I guess in a way you've just got to accept that there's going to be times when you have to change because something in the marketplace changes. But yeah,
and also
interesting
for
anecdote.
you, for them, you probably want to be looking at it anyway, because different apps will become available. Apps that existed will have changed over the course, and your business will have changed as well. So, what was right for you 5, 10 years ago,
Probably even
even
less than
even if
that,
the
right?
app
In
hasn't
today's
been
world,
sold or anything, you're probably going to want to review it anyway. You may come to the conclusion that, hey, look, I'm still in the right place. But
so you
you
probably have
probably,
to review it every 2 to 3 years anyway.
Yeah, and certainly in a regular enough occurrence that you're making sure you're not just sticking with something that was good for you years and years ago. So yeah, maybe that's 2 to 3 years. Maybe in some instances you can extend it. Maybe in some instances you even want to shorten it to a year or something every year. If it's something that you know is very dynamic and has a lot of competition, you probably want to do it as short as you can in order to help. But
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, well, anything else that you would point out in this one?
no, I think that's everything I wanted to kind of touch on. Obviously, as we mentioned, we focused on Zoho and Zero. As I did say at the beginning, they are not the only two that have other apps that go into their accounting software. So I certainly don't want people to think that these are the only two options if they want to integrate. They're just two
Two
options
that you
that
looked
we
at. And
selected for
fair to
this.
say that you've looked at and worked on uh, their softwares as well. They just
Absolutely.
provided a good benchmark of two different environments. Well noted.
Absolutely.
Okay, well noted. And thanks, Greg. It was really interesting hearing about some of your experiences.
No
And
worries.
really, really appreciated you going through that. I'll let you close out.
No, as always, thank you for taking the time out and listening to us. And Greg, thank you for joining me on this podcast. And hopefully that helps. If you do have any questions, as always, feel free to contact us, and we'd be more than happy to help in any way. Bye.